Hey guys, I'm TT.
And I'm Beck.
And we're what the kids call
Woke or Whateva.
Okay, so you guys haven't seen us in a while. We've been away. First of all, happy Black History Month. It is the month where we come alive. It is the month where our people is thriving. It's my birthday month.
C'est vrai.
Your girl's turning 23. So we have a couple things planned for the upcoming months. If you guys follow us on our social media, you might have seen that we've posted a couple of snippets of flyers that we have. So we have upcoming projects, our own individual projects, as well as another project that we're doing together. So follow us on social media to keep yourself updated on when we're releasing that. And yeah, so today we will be discussing about ableism, specifically in the Black community. We're going to be talking about ableism with our girl, Allie.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Je m'appelle Allie, j'ai 23 ans. Je suis étudiante en sociologie et en études interdisciplinaires de la sexualité. Puis je suis ici parce qu'on va parler de capacisme, which is great because I'm disabled.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about that. I guess I could say... What is my spiel? Donc, dans le fond, j'ai une maladie neuromusculaire qui s'appelle la dystrophie musculaire. Puis j'ai le sous-type limb-girdle. En anglais, on appelle ça limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. There are many subtypes to that type. Most of what we've come to realize is that I have the second subtype. But, you know, your girl cannot be basic. I'm not like these other girls. Mm-hmm. So it is not totally the type 2. It's like that type with something else. So yeah. De façon générale, ce que ça fait, c'est que je suis vraiment physiquement faible. The way that I like to explain it is when you go to the gym and for like the first time in a long time and you're like sore, the reason why you're sore is because your body's like, girl, what you doing? We were sitting on the couch. Why am I working like this? And then you're sore because it takes time for your body to recuperate and produce enough of the protein that is required for muscle repair. But you can train your body to make that protein, mm-hmm. which is why like athletes who work out like 6 days a week are not sore. But me, I can't train my body to do that because my DNA just doesn't produce enough of that protein. And over time, it produces less and less of that protein, which makes it a progressive illness. So yeah, I'm not the girl that you call to move your couch. I hate stairs. It's difficult for me to stand up from like low chairs and stuff like that. I'm not super flexible either because that affects that. Yeah, that's basically what I'm dealing with, I guess.
On va commencer par rentrer dans c'est quoi le capacisme. Si vous n'avez pas compris que Ableism et capacisme, c'est la traduction française. Puis, capacisme, dans le fond, c'est la discrimination envers les personnes qui sont en situation d'handicap, une discrimination qui est systémique comme le racisme, comme le sexisme, comme l'homophobie, etc. Mm-hmm. Est-ce qu'on peut rentrer dans ce qui est dans la même façon qu'on dit un peu racisme ordinaire, le capacisme ordinaire, qui n'est pas nécessairement visible ou ce que les gens qui sont able-bodied vont pas nécessairement reconnaître. Est-ce que tu as des exemples pour nous?
Oui, ben dans le fond, on en parlait juste avant que le podcast commence. Le fait qu'il y a vraiment pas beaucoup de choses qui sont accessibles. Donc, comme j'ai dit, moi, je suis handicapée de façon physique. Donc, je suis quelqu'un qui a une mobilité réduite. Donc, c'est vraiment ça que je suis plus à l'aise de parler. Mais évidemment, ça affecte les personnes sourdes, ça affecte les personnes aveugles, les personnes qui ont des problèmes au niveau de leur santé mentale. Donc, quand on parle d'accessibilité physique, des escaliers partout, qu'il n'y a jamais d'ascenseur nulle part, qu'il n'y a jamais de rampe nulle part, des cadres de portes qui sont très étroits, qui sont pas assez larges pour qu'une personne en chaise roulante puisse rentrer. Ça, c'est, je dirais, plus systémique parce que c'est de la façon dont les institutions, les immeubles, etc. sont construits. De façon plus ordinaire, c'est comment les personnes non handicapées sont privilégiées versus les personnes handicapées. Le fait que les opportunités, ça c'est quelque chose que je trouve qui est très important, c'est que les opportunités offertes aux personnes handicapées sont moins nombreuses, de moins bonne qualité et plus chères, constamment. Puis c'est ça affecte plein d'autres niveau de notre vie en tant qu'individu, mais aussi en tant que communauté. Donc voilà, de façon ordinaire, c'est ça, c'est le manque d'opportunités, le manque de chance. Puis évidemment, c'est sûr qu'il y a ce qui est plus explicite, là, donc tout ce qui est insulte, brutalité policière, etc.
Ouais. Puis c'est vraiment quelque chose que je pense que on n'a pas l'habitude de penser. Comme je trouve que même quand on parle d'oppression, capacisme, c'est la dernière chose que les gens vont nommer s'ils le nomment. Ça va être comme
Disability is the last thing on the t-shirt.
Always,
Ça va être raciste. Exactement, ça va être raciste. C'est maybe disabled pour montrer que je suis extra woke. Je l'ai écrit, mais c'est pas nécessairement quelque chose qu'on va comme réfléchir. Puis je me souviens, moi, dans le temps où on pouvait sortir, puis j'étais toujours dans le métro.
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time. J'étais toujours, quand j'allais dans les métros, puis les anciens métros, surtout les anciens wagons, puis il y avait un espace pour les personnes handicapées, donc un espace qui était réservé pour spécifiquement les personnes en chaise roulante. Puis je me demandais pourquoi cet espace existait, parce que j'ai jamais vu de personnes en fauteuil roulant dans le métro. Fait que là, dans ma tête, j'étais comme... Autant mettre des chaises. Parce que dans ma tête, j'étais juste genre... Là, je vais pas m'asseoir.
You're kind of right, though.
Ouais, je devrais m'asseoir. Mais j'ai pas fait le lien en fait, il n'y a pas d'ascenseur. Fait que comment une personne en chaise roulante peut arriver et prendre cette place s'il n'y a même pas d'ascenseur dans le métro? Je pense que sur les 60 stations à Montréal, il y a peut-être 10
You're
stations.
very generous.
Avec,
il y en a juste à Montmorency, Cartier, Henri Bourassa, Berry, même pas dans toutes les directions. Il y en a le gros.
5.
Damn.
Yeah. So if you go to Montmorency and then to Cartier, you're good, but you can't really go anywhere else after that.
But you see what's crazy is like I never even noticed that. Like that's what's even like that's really crazy. Like because I don't need to in a way, you know, I don't need to. It's really easy to not pay attention to things that don't necessarily oppress you, and I think that's why ableism is so not talked about, because it's really just disabled people that mostly discuss it, since it doesn't directly affect us. And specifically when we're talking about, and Beck and I have this conversation a lot, specifically in the recent days, that when we're talking about people talking about issues within the Black community, like when we're talking about activism or people that claim to be activists or people that are at the forefront of the movements, a lot of the time, the main system of oppression that we're going to put focus on is racism. But racism is not the only system that harms Black people. And by forgetting these other systems, we're also participating in the oppression of marginalized groups. Like racism is not the only problem. There's so many other issues. There's so many other systems of oppression. Comme Becca dit, there's fat phobia, there's colorism, there's texturism, there's elitism, classism, ableism, and that's not discussed, and we don't do a really good job at amplifying the voices of the disabled people that talk about this and try to make it known as well. And that causes people to not notice issues. Like I don't notice the fact that there's a lack of elevators in metros. I've never noticed that. Like you're talking now, I'm like, shit, c'est vrai, comme j'en ai pas vu vraiment. And you actually wrote about that in your article that you wrote for longevity, very inaccessible places, VIP. It's a really good article. I was telling Allie about that. You said that architecture in itself is ableist. Do you want to kind of get into that a little bit?
Yeah. So I wrote an article. It is more of an academic paper than an article, but it's called VIP, Very Inaccessible Places, and it is an autoethnography about inaccessible nightlife. And that's something that I'm very, very passionate about. As a cute girl in her 20s, I, like most people, I want to go to the club, right? I want to go to the bar. I want to have fun. But unfortunately, I can't really do that because Montreal is so horribly inaccessible. And I've had a lot of instances where I would call specifically to restaurants, bars, and clubs to ask them about accessibility. And I would have the employee on the phone, like literally laugh at me on the other line because they're like, why do you need an elevator? Why would anyone who needs an elevator be in that space? And specifically when we talk about nightlife, because it is not seen as a right, I guess, or as something that people absolutely needs, need, then it seems as if we don't need to make these spaces accessible, which is false, because there are countless articles that have been written about how, yes, of course, like how nightlife culture can be toxic, you know, very like misogynistic, homophobic, etc. But it also is good for the development of a lot of people, because we are put in a sexualized and gendered space that help us to grow as sexual gendered beings. And so when we talk about architecture and how, especially in Montreal, and I've talked to another disabled content creator from Ontario, he's been to Montreal twice, but he told me very honestly, he doesn't think he will ever go again because he can't do shit here. And, you know, architecture can be used as a form of oppression, because you're keeping certain people out of getting services, of having experience, and having access to things, you know, and we don't think about it because it seems like really like, I don't want to say that, but like snowflakey to be like, oh, stairs are oppressive, but bitch, they are. Like, it's not my fault, you know? They are, and we need to see them for what they are, as a form of oppression, because again, you're systematically keeping certain people out. And I feel like most people would never accept that for any other circumstance. People would speak up if certain people were systematically excluded from certain spaces. But this is what is happening right now as we speak, right? Whether that's the public transit, when we just talked about the metro, whether that's nightlife, whether that's just stores, restaurants, show venues and things like that. And we really need to understand how this architecture is oppressive, and we need to make a change in order for everybody to be included.
So obviously we are in a pandemic. Fun times.
Yes.
So what have you noticed in terms of the concessions that have been available to the public, to everyone, basically, to the people, after the COVID-19 outbreak? Like, what have you noticed in terms of what we as a community in general have been given access to that disabled people have been rejected prior to the pandemic? What have you noticed?
I mean, a lot, but I would say specifically remote learning and being able to work from home. These are things that the disabled community have been asking for literally years, right? And I'm one of these people, right? Like my last job, like I've called or like sent an email rather to like my boss being like, hey, have you seen the snowstorm that happened last night? She wasn't cute. If I go outside right now, this could be very dangerous for me, especially because if I fall, I can't stand back up. I have horrible balance. Eyes, not cute. Don't like her. So this is very dangerous for me. Like, I could literally fall in the middle of the street and I can't stand back up. So I'm just going to stay and lay in the street, right? And I've asked, like, oh, can I work from home? Specifically because that last job was mostly like social media work, answering emails. I was doing a lot of translation as well. I can do that from home, right? And I know I can do that from home because when Miss Pandemium happened, I was doing that from home, you know?
Yeah.
But my boss was like, oh, no, just take the day off and stay later tomorrow. Or come in Friday, even though you're not supposed to come in Friday. And I'm not the first person to have, you know, disabled person to have been in that situation. A lot of us have. And the same thing for school. Yes, there are universities that offer remote classes, but not all classes are given remotely. And some people can go to school most times, but then there are days where you're too much in pain, or the weather is not working with you, and so you cannot go to school. And then these people fail out of school. And you would be surprised to know how many disabled people have failed out of school because the school was not ready to make accommodations. And I'm one of these people. When I first started college, I had to fail out of my program initially because they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna like make accommodations for you, like for sure, like if you have a diagnosis, we'll get things figured out. Getting a diagnosis is extremely difficult, especially in Quebec where doctors are very out of reach. But I managed to get one, and unfortunately it wasn't complete enough for them. And they were like, yeah, that's not gonna work. But try again next year with a better one, and like bet, we got you. And so I did it. And when I gave them like all my paperwork, they were like, oh, word. Actually, I made a call last week and we can't help you. So you're failing still, right? And I literally lost a year of my life, a year and a half of my life in a program that was never equipped to accommodate me. And again, there are so many stories of disabled people who had to drop or fail out of school because the school and the people in those schools were not ready to help them. And they meet with their counselors and whatnot, and the people are just like, that sucks, I guess.
Yeah.
That sucks, I guess. And there's nothing that is being done. And so it's very funny to me to see how everybody can work from home, everybody can go to school from home, but when disabled people were asking for it, it was too much. It was too much work. And this is especially difficult when we talk about school and work because disabled people are so much more likely to be in poverty. It is harder for us to work because jobs do not accommodate our needs. And so we make less money than the average able-bodied person, but also we have to pay more for everything. And that's one thing that is not talked about. You know, like you have to Uber everywhere because you can't take the metro. You have to pay for delivery fees because sometimes you can't even go to the store that you want to get into, medical fees, etc. So yeah, I think for me, it's how quickly people were to accommodate everybody. But when it was literally to accommodate the minority, it was too hard. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would say that was definitely the thing that shocked me the most. But again, did it shock me? I don't know.
En fait, je trouve que quand on parle de personnes en situation d'handicap, les gens pensent que c'est quelque chose qui arrive à une personne puis c'est fixe, mais ça varie beaucoup. Fait que tu peux être able-bodied puis après, plus tard dans ta vie, tu deviens une personne en situation de handicap puis c'est vraiment plus commun que les gens pensent. Aussi, en situation de handicap, je pense qu'on a la chaise roulante en tête, mais ça veut pas nécessairement, c'est pas vraiment ça. Il y a tellement de gens, je me souviens au secondaire, tu te casses une jambe, puis là, tu dois te lever, puis partir avant la classe pour pouvoir aller prendre ton lunch, puis aller manger. Puis ça, c'est être en situation de handicap. Fait que la plupart des gens sont en situation de handicap. Ne pas avoir une bonne vision, c'est être en situation d'handicap, mais c'est quelque chose qu'on a tellement normalisé. C'est comme, OK, j'ai des problèmes avec mes yeux, j'ai m'acheté des lunettes. Puis c'est pas des choses à laquelle on pense, mais la plupart des gens, si c'est pas presque tout le monde, ont été en situation de handicap à un moment donné dans leur vie. À un moment donné, je me souviens, j'avais une douleur à la cheville qui s'en allait, puis qui venait, puis s'en allait, puis venait, puis genre, c'était vraiment difficile pour moi de marcher, c'était vraiment difficile pour moi de rien faire. Il fallait que je m'assoie constamment, Puis ça a duré un bon 2 semaines, là. Ça a duré un bon 2 semaines, puis je m'assoyais, puis mes boss étaient comme, mais t'as quoi? Je suis comme, mais pour de vrai, j'ai vraiment mal à la cheville, je sais pas quoi vous dire. Puis il fallait que je me déplace, que j'aille chez le médecin, puis j'ai dû prendre l'autobus pour le faire. Puis quand j'arrive chez les médecins, ils sont comme, t'es jeune, t'as rien. Je sais pas qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, hein, mais t'es jeune, t'as rien pour me renvoyer chez moi, puis j'avais encore mal. Puis pendant comme vraiment des semaines, j'ai dû, m'adapter. Puis c'est tellement bizarre, je suis dans le métro, puis je sens que je dérange, les gens me dépassent. Je suis comme, oh my God. Je suis genre comme, oh my God. Mais après, c'est parti. Mais juste pour dire que vraiment, la plupart du monde ont été en situation de handicap. T'as peut-être pas réfléchi comme ça parce que t'es comme, je vais guérir, mais c'est être en situation d'handicap. Puis on remarque quand t'es dans ces situations-là à quel point comme, genre, it sucks, puis genre, tu peux absolument rien faire. Mais pourquoi, si c'est quelque chose que la plupart du monde ont expérimenté ou vont expérimenter dans leur vie, et c'est quand même pas normalisé. C'est quand même pas quelque chose qu'on se questionne de peut-être que ce serait bien qu'il y ait des rampes partout, juste de même, like being wild, like ce serait vraiment bien qu'il y ait des rampes partout, qu'il y ait des ascenseurs partout. Puis on en a parlé brièvement dans un épisode, dans nos épisodes de Black Women and Black Men, quand dans le fond on a reçu 5 femmes noires différentes, puis Laudonné avait mentionné que avoir des ascenseurs, genre, ça dérange personne, mais ça nous aide tous. Legit, comme ça dérange personne, mais ça nous aide tous. Comme tout le monde profite du fait qu'il y a un ascenseur. Puis si tu profites t'en profites pas, tu peux vraiment still prendre l'escalier, comme il y a rien qui t'empêche. Fait que pourquoi c'est une question qui est encore, même, des fois même pas posée?
I mean, the short answer to that is, I don't know, because it'd be real dumb. Mais la réponse la plus longue et qui est aussi une hypothèse selon moi, and I'm so happy that you brought this up, and it is that it's important to understand that the society was not built for able-bodied people because, as Beck said, it fails able-bodied people constantly. It was built to make sure that disabled people could never have fulfilling lives. It was made to keep us at home, right? Quand Valérie Plante décide de fermer toutes les rues de Montréal parce qu'elle veut que les gens prennent le métro et fassent du vélo. Right.
Madame Plante.
Damn, that's true.
You know, and she does it on the back of like the environment and stuff, and it's like, girl, I don't eat meat. I love them animals, okay? And it's true. But you're not helping me doing this, right? I can't bike.
Yeah.
What metro am I going to take if I have to hurt my body going up and down these stairs all the time at every single station? You know? Like, and so that's why I think it's important to understand that this is not even to accommodate the minority. It would literally be to accommodate everybody because a lot of people will end up breaking a leg in their life, playing soccer or whatever. People get old and their mobility is reduced. People get pregnant and it's hard to get around. People have kids, they have to deal with strollers and crying babies and stuff. You know, I think we've all seen, you know, a poor woman trying to lift her stroller with her kid in it and up and down the stairs. These things are not helpful. Why are they still like this? It fails able-bodied people constantly. It's because it is set in place to make sure that disabled people do not have access to certain things. And we know that this is the case because it's not like disabled people don't fight for these things. They do. They go to court and they try and fight their cases and they lose these cases and they're told, well, no, actually, this is not against the law. It is normal that you can't get enough, that you don't get as much money as able-bodied people. Oh, you've lived with someone for 3 months. You need to depend on them anymore. We're cutting your allocations. This is in the law, right? There are laws still to this day that make sure that disabled people cannot have fulfilling lives. Disabled people don't have marriage equality in Canada or in the United States. In the United States, it's legal to pay disabled people under the minimum wage. Disabled people can be paid $3 an hour in the States.
What the fuck?
It's legal, right? In most states. And so the people at the top know. And even here we have the ACA, which is a cute little bundle of lies that says that by 2040, Canada is going to be barrier-free. I get that 2040 seems like not a real year, but it is. It's in 19 years. That's a lie. It's never going to happen. That will require, especially a city like Montreal, to be destroyed. You need to burn that shit down, right? Saint Laurent, there's not a thing on that street that's wheelchair accessible. Are we gonna destroy Saint Laurent? Never. So what do we do? What do I do? Right? So it is a very complex question as to why things are not changing. One thing that we do know is that the people at the top know that this is an issue. They're just not doing anything about it, which again is stupid because, like you said, most people could become disabled tomorrow.
Can you kind of get into the marriage equality part?
Yeah, so basically the way that, and this is like this in the States and in Canada, when we talk about marriage equality, it is not the same thing as what we mostly know, what we've seen with like gay marriage, right? If you're disabled, you can get married, obviously. The thing is, if you received federal funding, if you, and also in the States specifically, if you have health insurance, because you can't work, if you get married to someone, you are most likely to lose part of it or all of it, because then the state considers that you can become dependent on your partner, which is very toxic because if you need to stay with someone in order to repair your wheelchair if it breaks, to pay to go to the doctor, that puts you in a very vulnerable place. And we already know that disabled people are more likely than able-bodied people to be in toxic and abusive relationships. So this is very dangerous. And in Canada, it changes from one province to the other. But for example, in Ontario, basically, well, in Canada, to be considered married by the state, you need to get married or to live with someone for 12 years. And I think they call it common law.
Conjoint de fait.
Yeah.
Ouais.
Okay. In Ontario, if you're a disabled person and you move in with someone for 3 months, the states consider you married to that person. So if you live with a nigga for 3 months,
Damn.
the state, Justin Trudeau is like, oh, he paying for you, huh? That's the way that it is.
Damn, that's the season, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
And if you want to get money back, you have to divorce that person or move out.
Ooh.
that's crazy.
And disabled people in Ontario specifically have gone to court over this, but they lose every time because they're like, oh no, this is just the law. This is just the way that it is. So hope you had fun paying your lawyers. You know, these are real things, right? And it is specifically dangerous because disabled people are so much more likely to be in abusive relationships. When you're forcing them to become financially dependent on other people, it can only get worse.
I think that's really interesting that you said that because society in general, we view disabled people as being not independent, like dependent people, and the constantly needing assistance. But this view that we have is constantly being reinforced by the way that the system is built. So if we had proper accommodations, if the laws were in your favor, we wouldn't view you as not being independent because you wouldn't have any reason to be dependent on other people or, you know, things like that. So it's really crazy to think that the way that we view you is really a result of the system failing you. And then that causes us to be ableist and not even realizing it because it's so inherently built in the system. And I was reading an article about that a lot of disabled people gave their opinion on the pandemic and COVID-19, and a lot of people were saying you can really, we've always known this, like we've always known that we were technically disposable, but the pandemic really showed that. The idea that people just the idea, and we've heard that a lot of times, like people defending they're not wearing their mask, saying, well, it's only elderly people, so we can see if they're going to be at risk, not knowing that you cannot always see if it's a disabled person, and immunocompromised people, they're also at risk, and we don't really seem to care about that part. We're more focused on like the elderly people, and the hospitals are filled with elderly people. You don't have to worry, it's only affecting the elderly. But it's like there's so many people that are in the same boat because they're immunocompromised, because they're disabled, and we don't think about that. And that just goes to show how quote unquote disposable a lot of disabled people are, and reading about that really made me realize it's deeper than that. And just there's certain things that we've said during this pandemic, and I'm guilty of that. The whole like, you know how we give each other tips on how to make it during the pandemic and how to stay positive and things like that, and in a way spreading toxic positivity, but also the whole you guys don't need to stay cooped up in your house, like go out, take a walk, go exercise, take a walk. And when I was reading that, I was like, shit, I'm guilty, bro. Like I've said that, like it's all good during the summer. I like take a walk, you'll be fine. Like these are messages that we share to the public, not knowing that the take a walk thing is not as easy for everyone. There's people that can't take a walk. Like there's all of these articles about COVID-19 pandemic survival kits and all of that. And it's inherently ableist, saying things like, I want to go back to normal. But it's like that this was always your reality. Like there was never a normal, but for us it was, and we really don't realize how ableist our society really is. And it's interesting to know about that.
For sure. And one thing that I'm very scared about is all the disabled people who have in a way thrived during this pandemic because they could go to school remotely, right? Like just last semester, going to university from home, I never had to care about missing an exam because of the weather, right? I never had to be like, well, if I go outside, I could slip and very severely injure myself. Or I could just stay home and fail my exam because teachers are like, well, if you don't come in, you got a 0 and that's it, right? So I didn't have to think about that. But it is true that a lot of people during this pandemic have thought that this virus was mostly going to affect the elderly, which is true. But also a lot of people who are immunocompromised, and specifically because I'm not considered immunocompromised, but a lot of people who have other types of my disability, specifically people with SMA, which stands for spinal muscular atrophy. Usually these people are don't get to walk because the protein that I was talking about earlier, they really basically don't really produce any. So they're, babies that never learn how to crawl because they just can't and stuff. And a lot of the times, if not all of the time, it affects the organs. And so they have lungs that are more fragile, and if they get COVID, they could die, right? And so what happens is that, of course, these people will stay home, but a lot of them have caretakers. They have people go to the grocery store for them and bring the food home, and they cook for them. If you're not wearing a mask in Super C because you don't care and you don't see anybody in a wheelchair, well, the person that you're coughing on without a mask next to you in the line could be the caretaker of someone who is immunocompromised.
Shit, that's true.
And there's this content creator that I've been following for a long time now. She has SMA. Her name is Alex Dacey. On Instagram, her name is Wheelchair Rapunzel. She's amazing, by the way. Follow her. She has amazing content. And two of her caretakers got COVID.
Wow.
And so she was forced home, and she had to eat the food that a COVID positive person was cooking for her. Someone with COVID was giving her a bath, washing her face, brushing her teeth. You can't wear a mask when you're brushing your teeth, right? And of course, her caretakers were very, very cautious, and they weren't going to the parties, but someone needs to bring food home. Someone has to go buy stuff for her. And so it's very important that people understand that there are a lot of people who, everybody is important, obviously, but there are people who give care to people who are vulnerable, who are immunocompromised. And so when you decide that you don't care about this virus because you're not immunocompromised, and you look around and it seems like nobody's immunocompromised, again, you could be giving the virus to someone who is taking care of someone who's immunocompromised. And what do, right? She couldn't stay in her home and not eat and not shower for 2 weeks for her caretakers to get better. She had to live through that every day. So it's just something people need to really be careful about and think about. And I get that a lot of people don't think about that because they're not in contact with people who are disabled, but they also don't engage with the content of disabled people. And they don't read the books. So
right. So your disability can sometimes be less noticeable, especially if I go on your Instagram and you're not posting posting anything about your disability, I would not know, right? And sometimes even looking at you in person, you would not know. So it is a little bit less noticeable. So do you sometimes feel the pressure to have to come out about your disability and have to kind of say it before someone notices? And how has coming out affected your interpersonal relationships with people?
Right. It has become a little bit more noticeable lately, I would say in the last year or so. And anyways, if you follow me on Instagram, you watch my stories or anything like that, I post about it quite frequently. So you probably notice or, think about it a little. But I would say I have been in situations where I had to disclose it just for my own peace of mind, because there was a time where I wouldn't and people didn't know, and even my closest friends weren't even really sure what was up with me, because that's a lot of pressure and you don't really know how people are going to react, right? And I think we've talked about it, you mentioned it, but a lot of disabled people feel very disposable, right? And a lot of us feel like if we tell people are just going to be like, oh, and just leave. So of course that was something that was really difficult at first. But now, because I've honestly stressed myself so much about it in the past, going on dates and, telling the guy oh, I need to go to the bathroom. And he's like, oh yeah, sure. Okay, meet you outside. And I don't go to the bathroom and I just try to figure my way out of the bar without tripping on myself in front of him and things like that. And that's something that we don't talk about. Disabled people talk about it all the time, but in the bigger sphere, how much energy and time disabled people take out of their day to look less disabled. And that shit is exhausting. We literally physically hurt our bodies doing it, but mentally it is so draining. And I have decided that I'm too cute to be this stressed, okay? I am too cute to be this stressed. And so, yeah, now I am more open about it, even if it isn't that easy all the time. But it's also just so that I can be clear about it. Like, if you're going to leave me for it, I better not even start to engage with you, you know? I've had good, responsive people just being like, oh, yeah, okay. And, you know, we figure things out and, you know, they're ready to put the effort in. But I've also had people that were like a little bit, oh, like, I guess I'll have to think about what that means. And it's like, well, what is there to think about? You know, like, there's nothing to think about. Either you're going to stay and still view me as a full human being, you know, or you're just going to leave. And if you're going to leave, then tell me now, because the girl will be on a schedule, right? I got so many other people to meet, so many other things to do than to deal with you.
Facts.
So let's be upfront, right?
Yeah.
But of course, it has been a journey. I am more confident now than I was a year ago about it, for sure. But I think it is still something that you never get totally okay with, specifically someone like me, for who it is not that visible all the time. But sometimes it also just like helps with just little comments, right? Like people being like, oh, you walk a bit weird, you know? And it's like they just say it, right? Because they're like, But if you know, then you're not going to give me that comment. That's going to make me feel insecure about it the whole time that we're together. So it has changed my relationships, mostly for the better, because the people for whom it wouldn't have been for the better, they're not around here. But at the end of the day, it really is just about peace of mind for me and making sure that I don't waste my energy trying to pretend that I'm not disabled, because at the end of the day, I am.
Yeah.
Je trouve les personnes able-bodied people interagissent pas beaucoup avec les personnes qui sont en situation de handicap. Mais la seule fois où il y a actually une interaction, il y a ce qui arrive beaucoup, ou ce qui se présente beaucoup, c'est ce qu'on appelle inspirational porn. Et ça, c'est un terme qui a été crédité à Stella Young, qui n'est plus, paix à son âme. Mais dans le fond, inspirational porn, c'est quand on regarde une personne en situation de handicap, on est comme, oh, wow, bravo, comme tu m'inspires à faire mieux.
You're so strong,
genre,
you're so inspirational.
Ouais, il y a beaucoup de memes sur ça. Sur Internet, on va voir quelqu'un qui a pas de main puis qui peint, puis comme, wow, ouais. Puis si elle peut faire ça, pourquoi tu peux pas être genre Van Gogh? Là, t'es comme, OK. Puis c'est vraiment la seule façon qu'on interagit, où les gens font un genre de... je me souviens quand... En tout cas, ça, c'est mes Facebook Days. So, je sais plus si c'est a thing. Mais quand quelqu'un allait, par exemple, au prom avec quelqu'un qui était comme... qui était trisomique.
Yeah.
Viral.
Genre, viral. Genre, c'est comme...
Yeah.
la personne est tellement gentille et tout. Non, c'est une genre de pitié.
It is. This is what it is.
Puis aussi, il y a aussi le... comme si j'étais toi, comme je serais pas capable de, ou je voudrais pas faire ça, ou c'est comme si I would want to die.
I mean, yeah, like I've been in situations, like I sat at tables where people were like, je sais pas si j'aimerais mieux comme avoir genre la maladie de Allie ou être autiste.
What the
And
fuck?
it's like, I'm a real person, guys. I'm here and I have to live in this body, you know, or like this movie that came out like a few years ago, what's it called? Me Before You, about like the guy who's...
Oui,
le gars qui est quadriplegic. Puis comme, spoiler, he kills himself at the end. Whoa. And then you're like, because he can't, like he doesn't want to be in a wheelchair. And of course you finish watching that movie and you're like, if I was a quadriplegic, would I want to kill myself? And it's like, there are people who are quadriplegic who live their lives and they don't want to hear about how you would die if you were in their shoes. Because if you would die, you're never going to try and make this world a better place for us. You think we should just die. Mm-hmm. And of course people are not that upfront about it, but at the end of the day, this is what it is, you know? And that's a big part of inspirational porn too. It's like, And the reason why she called it porn is because there's an objectification. You're using a disabled person for your own benefit as an able-bodied person, which is looking at that disabled person and being like, oh, my life is so much better than theirs. A few. Yeah. I can go on with my day, right? But this disabled person exists in real life, right? In the case where it is not a drawing, this person, this kid who's like painting with his toes because he doesn't have hands, is a real child that's going to grow up and be faced with the reality that this world was built for his downfall. He's maybe going to have to, again, fail out of school because his teachers are going to be like, we can't help you. Sorry about that. But you just scrolled. You just scrolled, and now you're laughing at the Mariah Carey meme, right? Like, but this person still exists, and they still have to deal with ableism every day. And I get how, for a lot of able-bodied people, this seems like a pick-me-up, right? But, like, it's so dehumanizing because you're not helping disabled people when you do that. You're just using us to feel better about yourself. And that's just bad. I don't know how else to explain that. It's just bad.
Mais je trouve qu'il y a un lien à faire entre... Tu sais, les gens sont comme, est-ce que j'aimerais être ça ou like die avec le concept de eugenics. Donc, le concept de eugenics, c'est un peu... C'est basically Hitler, là. C'est vraiment la pensée qu'il y a des gènes supérieurs puis qu'on veut, as the human race, aller vers reproduire ces gènes-là. Puis... La Deuxième Guerre mondiale, c'est plus imagé, on comprend la race aryenne, les cheveux blancs, les yeux bleus et tout, mais...
There were a lot of people on that list, okay?
Ouais, fait qu'il y a tout ce qui est pas ça est genre, pas bad, mais on veut aller vers comme mieux. Puis je trouve que c'est là qu'on peut faire le lien entre being disabled and being black. Pas que c'est la même chose, mais c'est l'idée de being black is bad, puis on veut aller vers lighter. Fait que je trouve que c'est comme ça, le même raisonnement s'applique. Comme on veut s'éloigner de quelque chose d'autre pour quelque chose de mieux. Fait que disabled is seen as a bad thing. You don't want to be disabled. You don't have kids who are disabled, etc. Comme tu veux pas être d'une certaine shade, tu veux pas avoir une certaine texture de cheveux. Puis c'est la même, c'est pas la même oppression qui s'applique, mais il y a un parallèle.
Non, définitivement. Puis justement dans ces raisonnements-là, super hypothétiques, qui sont vraiment déshumanisants, c'est qu'on réalise pas cette partie-là. It's probably going to sound like very not problematic, but like shocking, I guess. But personally, like, of course it sucks to be disabled because of the way that the world is set up. But if I'm being real honest, a bitch doesn't want to run, okay? Faire du jogging autour du parc La Fontaine,
Ça te dirait.
I don't want it, right? Est-ce que je veux jouer au hockey? For whom? No, I don't want it, right? And I feel like a lot of people use eugenics and blame disabled bodies because it's easier to do that than to actually fix the world. And we see this specifically, and it's something that is really irritating to me, how people always ask me if I had like an accident. You know, people are like, oh, est-ce que tu as eu un accident? Genre, t'es tombé? And it's like, no, I was just born this way. You know, I was just born like that. There's nobody to blame. There's no event to blame for the way that my body is. I was just born like that, right? And I feel like when people ask that, I get that it doesn't necessarily come from a bad place, but it still feels like you're trying to put the blame on me, you know, for being reckless and, you know, or on someone else for putting me in that situation. But it's like, no, I was just born like that. And people are going to keep being born like that because that's just the way that it is. And when we put the blame on genes and on disabled people in their bodies, it validates ableism in our society because we're like, well, if you weren't born like that, we wouldn't need to have elevators. But it's like, but I am though.
Yeah.
So what now?
Yeah.
What do we do now? And I also get really, not frustrated because I know that a lot of disabled people are in pain when it comes to disability. And so when we're talking about cures, my disability doesn't have a cure. There is currently 2 cures for SMA, like treatments. But for my specific type, there aren't. And it's like, again, would I like to not be disabled? I guess, because right now the world is not changing fast enough for me to be able to have a fulfilling life. Even though my life is, still very fulfilling, it would just need a lot of outside work for it to be equal to, I guess, some other people. But I don't really truly like care. Again, like I said, jogging, don't like her. The test beep beep.
T'es good. Comme t'es good.
Je suis très good.
Ouais.
Si tu savais à quel point je suis good, je suis good. I don't want it, right? And so I do think it is important to talk about the gene part of this because it sounds so dehumanizing. And this whole conversation, this is what it comes back to, right? People assuming that disabled lives cannot be fulfilling, and that therefore we need to get rid of us. No. No.
Yeah, it's really interesting because even when Stella Young, she was talking, she was saying how she doesn't have an issue with her body.
Yeah,
like she's good with it. Like she actually enjoys. She said, I'm very fond of my body, and what we're doing by creating this inspiration porn is essentially saying that being disabled is bad and there's nothing wrong with being disabled, and you could live, like you said, a very fulfilling life. What's bad is the way that the world views disability and the way the world does not accommodate you in any way. And I feel like in general, life can be very miserable, and a lot of people feel happiness from knowing that they don't have something as bad. So you kind of feel a sense of relief when it's not as bad. But when you, as let's say a person that's disabled, but when you think about it, the only reason why you view their disability as bad is because the world does not. It does not exist to greet you guys, right? And if it did, then we wouldn't really see it like that. And I think gratefulness, a lot of our views on gratefulness is very ableist, like super ableist. And I wanted to talk about that. There's a lot, and I've been struggling with that, like finding ways to be grateful for things without having it rooted in other people having it worse than me. It's really hard to find that balance, I feel, because I like to meditate a lot. Like I do a lot of meditations and I do a lot of guided meditations, and I have different apps that I go to for that. And I was doing one specific meditation. I remember it was before our episode on like with the guys on patriarchy. I remember that day, and I was meditating. And I did a different like I just clicked on a different meditation, and the meditation was meditation for gratefulness, and it was pretty good. And then near the end of the meditation, they were like, I am grateful because I have both legs, and I was like, dog, like I had to pause because obviously I've educated myself more on ableism to understand that, whoa, there's kind of a problem with that. Because let's say I didn't though, like let's say I didn't have both legs, or let's say I didn't have both functioning legs, and then I'm in the moment, I'm feeling zen, I'm feeling relaxed, and then you're welcomed with such violence, like I'm grateful for having both legs. And it's like the idea of rooting like our gratefulness in having certain things that other people don't have access to, and being like, I'm thankful for that. It really is ableist. So it's hard to.
J'ai challengé mes parents sur ça, en fait, parce que that's how people pray a lot.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
How people pray, genre,
exactly.
Okay, moi, j'ai une maison, j'ai ça, puis il y a des gens qui l'ont pas, puis je suis comme, OK, oui, and
yeah.
Eux, ils font quoi? They don't pray?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Ils font quoi? They don't pray? Mais j'ai l'impression qu'à la place, on n'a pas c'est encore le few, là, c'est comme, oh, few, c'est pas moi, so I'm grateful, puis on n'a pas assez j'ai ce privilège d'avoir ça. So, comme, I'm gonna work, ou au moins juste be aware and, like, try to share what I have. Ou, comme, essayer de fight for, like, what's right. Il n'y a pas l'action avec. Il y a juste, comme, oh, c'est pas moi. God, like, shout out, comme, I'm
But
good.
I've been struggling with
Mais
that.
il y a vraiment pas tu peux être grateful de genre, tu sais, genre, toi, j'ai ci, c'est ça. Mais, puis j'ai une pensée pour les gens qui l'ont pas, and I want to do, like, je sais pas, I want to do good for them, ou j'aimerais, like, I want them to be grateful on the same level. So je vais faire. Il y a comme une action qui manque pour moi là, comme in that.
But I struggle with that. I really struggle with that because I'm like, okay, I have, I used to do like a gratefulness journal in the morning. And then it's like, it's weird because once you understand systems of oppression, for me, it was kind of challenging. Like, okay, like how do I find things to be grateful for that is not rooted in other people's misery? And it's kind of hard to do that. It's like, okay, I'm grateful to have such a loving family, but then other people don't. So then, like, where's the balance? Like, where's like I'm trying to like,
Est-ce que tu veux comme add?
I mean, it's very, very true. And we were talking about pity a little earlier, and you know, the whole thing about, oh, you're so inspiring, you're so strong. And to me, it is really annoying because I don't want people to have pity for me, because in my head, when you have pity for someone, you need two things. First, you need to, well, I guess three. You need to see like a situation that is unfortunate, I guess. And then you have to be in a place where you feel like that person cannot do anything to help themselves, but you also cannot do anything to help them, right? So when we see these like commercials of like the baby ducks like covered in oil because of like genre les bateaux de pétrole and stuff, we're like, you know, we're like, oh my god, that's so sad. Of course that duck cannot help itself. It's a duck. And you also can't just jump on a plane and go save that specific duck, right? So of course we have pity for that. We have a lot of pity for animals usually, because, you know, we see like a lost dog on Facebook and we're like, oh my god, you can't go save that dog. The thing is, I'm not a dog. I'm not a duck covered in oil, and you could actually help me, right? And that's also one of the big reasons I feel why a lot of people don't have pity for homeless people, because they're like, well, it's your fault that you're homeless, right? Which is also why we've seen the whole curfew thing with, you know, the links. Do they connect? Great. And so, yeah, like I don't want people to have pity for me, because actually you could help me. And actually you're the one who's going to have to help me, because my people have tried to help themselves for years and we are not being heard. And that's the same thing for literally everything, right? Black people didn't like wake up last summer being like, hey, do y'all want to care about us or not? Like we've been fighting and bleeding for this thing. The people who have the power to help us just don't want to. And so when you have pity for specifically disabled people, this is problematic, because you could actually help us. You could actually make a change. Yeah. And of course, sometimes it seems a little bit more abstract, right? And that's to go back with the whole like cure and treatment thing. To me, it's not that I want a cure. It's not necessarily that I want a treatment, because even if they did, right? Even if they found a cure for my specific subtype, there are so many other subtypes of neuromuscular illnesses, so many other types. What about these people? If you put an elevator in a building, you save all of us. Why are we spending so much time on treatments and cures and all of that when we could literally just make accessible housing affordable? When we could just fix the fucking metro? You know what I mean? And I think the problem with this whole, you're so inspirational and strong and blah, 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 is rooted in that. And also, to be very honest, and that's where I find that the intersection of being a Black woman and being disabled really interlace, I guess, is the fact that, to be, again, very honest, I don't want to be strong, I want to be protected, right? I don't want to have to go through shit and have people DM me on my birthday saying like, you're like so strong and like, it's so inspiring to see you go. It's like, we haven't talked in 3 years. Why, you know what I mean? Like, again, I don't want to be strong. I want to be protected. I want to make sure that I get to survive in this world. And things are going to need to change in order for that to happen. So, yeah, it's like, it's really annoying when people have this constant feeling of pity, because it feels like there's this space between that person and you, because it is very clear that this person doesn't want to help you, sometimes because they feel like they can't, but it's like, actually you could. You know?
Mais je pense qu'avoir pitié, c'est plus facile. Comme actually, juste comme, qu'est-ce que je pourrais faire moi?
No, for sure.
Oh, je suis vraiment pitié, like, j'empathie. Comme je suis avec toi. T'es pas avec moi, en fait.
Nigga, you ain't supporting me, the fuck? Like,
non, c'est vrai, c'est vrai.
Do you feel, like, obviously, as a disabled person, you're definitely failed by the system. Do you have moments where you feel on top of that failed by your community as well, being a Black woman?
I think, yes, in a certain way. I guess seeing a lot of the activism that has been going on over the summer, and this whole burden that has been put on the back of Black women when it comes to this, is difficult, specifically because I know that my body has limits, right? Like, I went to one of the protests, but I couldn't do protests every week, right? And specifically the one in Montreal, like, where it was going up Saint Laurent.
Oui, Saint Laurent.
Yo, listen, I got beef with that street. Yo. She hates me. I don't know what I did to her. Anyways, so yeah, I couldn't do that, right? And also, just the whole stereotype and idea that Black women are stronger than everybody else countless Black women and activists have talked about how this is, first of all, not true, but how dangerous and toxic it is. But it is even more dangerous for me because on top of not being stronger than most other women, I'm actually literally way weaker than most women, right? And so when you look at me and you're like, oh no, she's strong, that can literally put me in actual literal danger. And it has, you know, like I've been out and about and fell and people are like, you good? And they just keep walking or ask people for help. And they're like, no, this is not high, you can go. And they keep walking, right? And I do think that this, I mean, as we know, this also exists in the Black community. Black men are not immune to that. They put a lot of the weight of the revolution on us. And so as someone who is literally physically weaker than most people, this feels like doubled. And yeah, it literally can put me in dangerous situations.
Je pense à ça par rapport à l'activiste. Puis c'est quelque chose que j'ai vu il y a des années puis qui a remis les choses en perspective. Les gens qui disent oh, moi je fais vraiment de l'activisme, vous êtes derrière vos écrans. But being disabled and like activism is online is really, really important. Puis c'est pas moins important parce que toi, t'es allé marcher que comme... que legit, comme il y avait vraiment un sens de genre si t'es pas allé aux protestes comme là you fake you're a fake ass, mais c'est genre si je peux pas again Saint Laurent parce que moi aussi je struggle, j'étais tellement fatiguée
non mais pour de vrai defund Saint Laurent parce que c'est très like
can we start it? Qu'est-ce qu'il y a sur cette façon appartement 200
I can't remember the time in my heels that damn hill like just defund Saint Laurent.
Nobody wants her at the table. She can go.
Ouais, mais vraiment l'idée l'activisme online qui est important puis qui spread awareness when you actually read. Je sais qu'il y a des gens qui disent n'importe quoi.
Read a book.
Mais Allie, t'as fait plein d'articles, t'es vraiment vocal, comme j'apprends beaucoup sur ta plateforme. Fait que c'est aussi, il faut penser à ça aussi quand on parle d'activisme, puis c'est un activisme hyper valide, là, comme hyper valide.
Mais je pense que c'est surtout qu'il y a beaucoup de gens qui réalisent pas à quel point le in-person activism, c'est pas accessible pour plusieurs personnes. On faisait des jokes sur Saint-Laurent, mais comme, it is true, you know, and like, power to whoever planned that protest, but they didn't think about that, right? They didn't think about all the disabled Black folks who would want to go to that protest, but couldn't because it was too difficult. And I went because... I don't know. I mean, I know when I wanted to go, but you know what I mean? Like, I went, but like, I struggled. And it's important to understand that, especially when it comes to disabled people, like, we are in every single community, right? I saw a stat that said that the disabled community is the biggest minority group in the world. And we want to be part of so many things, but we can't because a lot of it is so inaccessible. But at the same time, it's also difficult morally, like, and emotionally because it is literally so easy to keep us out of things. You know, like, you don't even need to be violent, right? Like, put a staircase and we have to stay out like dogs, you know?
Wow,
mais l'équipement pour rendre un immeuble accessible est tellement cher. Comme je me souviens quand on voulait organiser quelque chose, puis on est comme, oh, on a besoin d'équipement pour que ce soit accessible. Comme si, je sais pas pourquoi c'est hyper cher comme ça, mais c'est vraiment cher, comme si on veut juste, like, c'est vraiment facile d'être juste comme bag. On n'a pas le budget. Comme juste bag.
Which sucks because as disabled people, we have to pay for that stuff, right? Like, and you would be surprised to know, I mean, I guess not surprised if you've listened to this episode, but like how much the government doesn't care, right? Like, this is literally so embarrassing, but before I moved to my current apartment, the government gave me $11 a month to pay my rent. 11.
Okay, non, c'est quoi le calcul?
Whoa.
C'est
11. And so when I went to ask for it, the lady at the desk was like, well, so there's two possibilities. Either you're going to receive one check at the beginning of next month, and they're going to send you a check every month, or you're going to get one check at the end. And if you get, like, at the end of the year, and if that's the case, it's because they've considered that you don't need more money. And I was, like, waiting for the check, and then I didn't get it. And I was like, fuck, I guess I'll just get one at the end. And I received a check of $110 $10 for 10 months.
Oh my God.
That's $11 a month to pay your rent. Again, I don't know where they think I was living. And sure, at the time, my rent wasn't that expensive. But now that I live in an accessible building, which is where I should have lived all along, but I couldn't because I couldn't afford it, the amount that they give me is still really ridiculous. And the problem with that is that it's not like I have other options.
Yeah.
You know, like everywhere, like the only places that I can live is in like brand new buildings with like a gym and a sauna and a pool and stuff. It's like, I can't even use this shit. I'm paying all of that for the elevator, but they don't care, right? So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. But at this point, I just hope that people understand that and really educate themselves to know what they can do to help this situation, because we've been trying to help ourselves, but unfortunately, like literally, like I said earlier, like any other situation, the people in power are the ones who are going to make a change at the end of the day. Right? White people are the ones who need to fix this shit for the rest of us. Straight people are the ones who need to fix this shit for the non-straight people. Cis people are the one who have to fix this shit for trans people and non-binary people as well. Like, able-bodied people need to do the work because we've been marching, we've been rolling, and this is not enough.
Yeah, that actually answered the last question that I had of what should we do, like what change can we make? And it's true, and we have to start. It's so easy, especially when you're part of a marginalized group. It's so easy to only care about the system of oppression that directly affects you. Like, it's so easy to do that. And a lot of people believe that it's already so much to handle. Like, why should I care about other systems of oppression? But then we forget that we perpetuate other systems as well. It's not because we're suffering at the hands of one that we're not enabling another, right? And just the idea of, you know, I want to do an event, but then, oh my God, accessibility is too expensive. But then should you really have that event? You know what I mean? You know, like, should you because then you can't afford it.
I'm so happy you said that.
Like, can you really afford, like, when you think about it for real, if it's not accessible to everyone, and you cannot afford to pay for that extra accommodation, then you can't afford to have your event, because at the end of the day, you guys stay paying for your extra shit.
Yeah, like I have to pay my rent.
Yeah, and that's a way to use, you know, that's a way to help as well as able-bodied people. And that's definitely something that I need to check myself on, and I'm gonna, like, it's a learning process, but we have to realize in what ways that we're participating in the system. Whether it's a lot of times we're not consciously doing it, but we are still doing it, and you know, Google is free, you know.
Always.
It is so free.
Been free. Non, je pense que c'est tellement facile de se concentrer sur ta marginalisation et pas te concentrer sur à quel point comme tu peux être un oppresseur as well. Et je pense que les gens sont vraiment inconfortables. Aussi inconfortables que quand on parle aux blancs, quand tu dis, mais you're oppressing too. C'est juste comme, non, like, mais oui, en fait. Oui, et c'est en plus, et pour de vrai, c'est beaucoup plus helpful de think that way, de juste comme, who am I, like, oppressing, puis qu'est-ce que moi je peux faire pour aider les autres, que d'être juste toujours comme, dans tous les cas, comme, je suis marginalisée parce que most people are oppressed and oppressed, like most people.
Yeah.
Most people.
There is only one Jeff Bezos, you know, like. And I really just need to say this because it is so important. And you talked about it with, I don't want to be controversial or anything, but the whole Elisabeth Rioux situation. We really lose time when we try and focus on the less marginalized people.
Facts.
Because that's the same thing as capitalism. This shit doesn't trickle down, okay?
Est-ce que tu veux le remettre en perspective pour les gens qui savent pas?
Did you hear that sound? I was like,
please don't meet me.
Okay, so I guess quickly, if you don't know who Elisabeth Rioux is, good for you, honestly. Mais what happened basically is that she was involved with a man who was abusive, and she came forward about the abuse that she was going through, which powers to her. This is a very difficult thing to do, especially when you're famous and, you know, everybody looks at your relationship. And then I think it's at TVA.
Whateva.
Yeah.
Whateva.
They talked about it, and they were very insensitive about it, you know.
Misogyne.
Yeah. They were like, oh, she's in an abusive relationship, but she shows her butt on the internet, so why should we care? And it's like, I don't know, because she's human. that's just my opinion.
Corrélation zéro.
Yeah, I don't know why this was brought up, but sure, okay. And her specifically, she was very, very, of course she was very hurt by this, and I can't even imagine how difficult that is. But we also need to remember that this same girl was the one who was like, I can't talk about BLM because I'm pregnant, and this is too stressful for me. So yeah, I can't. And I think a lot of people were like, oh, how could you like be so insensitive to what she's going through? And it's like, I have never been in an abusive relationship, and hopefully I never will. And I can't even begin to imagine how that feels like. But when you are a privileged woman like her, who's able-bodied, thin, cis,
Rich.
Ooh,
Je veux vraiment insister.
coins, okay?
She has coins.
Yeah. But when you start, you know, like focusing on someone like that, sure, it helps because, you know, like domestic abuse is real and we need to talk about that. But it doesn't do anything for the Black trans woman who's in an abusive relationship, right? It doesn't do anything for disabled queer people who are struggling. It does nothing because this thing does not trickle down when you start at Elisabeth Rioux.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
right?
It's always from the bottom up. Always.
If tomorrow we all link in a circle and hold hands and decide that we will love and respect and praise Taylor Swift, that doesn't do shit for me as a Black disabled queer woman. That doesn't do shit for me. Maybe it'll do something for Elisabeth Rioux because she's also rich and famous and white, but it doesn't do anything for most people. And what I said, I shared backstory about it, but I also said there are such a small number of people who can really, truly get away with not caring about other people. And clearly, unfortunately, Elisabeth Rioux thought she was one of them. She said, BLM, ça c'est pas mon bail, bonne soirée. And it came to bite her in the butt literally 2 months later.
Ouais, puis tu sais, c'est pas une histoire de genre parler puis faire réciter I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King.
Not enough.
C'est vraiment être même redirigé à des plateformes que tu penses qui sont plus capables que toi d'en parler ou donner de l'argent. Open your purse.
Show us,
Open
show
your
us
purse.
what you donated.
Tu peux donner et tout. Puis TVA, c'est une plateforme qu'on a critiquée plusieurs fois, qui a été, tu sais, raciste. D'autres choses, puis les gens, personne nous occupe là quand on le dit, mais comme this, like, it's not journalism, comme ça. Puis, fait que c'est vraiment pour expliquer que toutes les systèmes d'oppression, like, they're linked. Si tu m'aides dans mon problème, ça va t'aider dans ton problème, comme juste par défaut. Puis c'est quelque chose que les gens comprennent vraiment pas. C'est comme, oh, that's their problem. I'm gonna do my shit. Mais everything is linked. Puis tant que vous aurez pas fait le lien que comme mon oppression et ton oppression, c'est la même source, on va jamais y arriver.
Yeah.
On va vraiment jamais
But
y
we
arriver.
said that in the latest episode. If we work to our way, like from the bottom up, everyone wins at the end of the day. Like everyone wins.
Do you want to win?
Like je comprends pas. Like, don't y'all want freedom? Like,
Yeah.
that's the way that we have to do it. Like with ableism, you could be able-bodied and tomorrow you're not. And then all of a sudden you realize how the system will not work to your advantage. Let's dismantle this shit so then there's just no system of oppression in terms of your ability to move or things like that. So there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to be done, and it takes a lot of energy to second guess and be like, wait, am I participating in someone's oppression by doing that? And a lot of times people don't want to have all of these thoughts. A lot of it's easier, right? We're always saying how we're the sensitive generation and how we're always complaining about shit, but I feel like there's more information out, but people have been fighting about, like, people have been fighting, but I guess we're in a more quote unquote, I would say knowledgeable, like more resourceful time. But you have to take the step back and be like, okay, by doing this, am I being inclusive to everyone? And we need to start making those steps to be, and especially if you consider yourself to be an activist.
Especially, puis pour de vrai, ça vient. Après, ça va être ça a l'air dur au début, mais après, ça devient un réflexe.
Yeah.
Quand tu fais l'exercice de, oh, est-ce que je suis privilégiée de telle façon et tout, qui je presse, après, ça devient. Il y a des affaires que, naturellement, je suis juste comme, oh, this this is not good. Puis je peux me corriger. Puis ta première réaction, c'est toujours ton conditionnement. Ta deuxième, c'est ce que tu choisis d'être.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. People don't like to be told that they're privileged, especially if they're part of a marginalized group.
Yeah.
They hate that. It's like how I suffer as well. And I just really want in 2021 for us to do better. Beck and I with this podcast, the last thing that we want to give is the impression that we're there. We're not, at all. I do a lot of things that are without realizing that are ableist, that are fat phobic. I do that, but I'm fine with being called out on it, and I'm fine with sitting down and acknowledging it, because it's okay, thank you. Now let me do better. Let me learn, and I really want people to get to start sitting in that discomfort, but then acknowledging it and doing the work. It's not because you are a victim of a system of oppression that you're exempt from harming others. I really, and I'm definitely speaking to my Black people right now, I really want y'all to know what's up, because I see some shit sometimes, and it's you're for the people, but then we tell you, but you're you're harming these people that are part of the people that you're for. Yeah. But it's but how? And it's this defensiveness. And we really, whenever you get called out on something, whenever you get called out for participating in a system of oppression and harming others, you really need to take a step back, say thank you, and say sorry, and keep moving. Keep it up, keep moving.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the key to get to that point is to put real faces behind these types of oppression. Right. An example that I like to give is 2 years ago, I did a workshop on trans realities, and being a cis person, of course I try to educate myself as much as I can, but I'm still cis at the end of the day, right? And during that workshop, I answered a question where I basically took for granted that everybody who is pregnant is a woman. And the person holding that workshop was well, actually, there's a lot of people who are pregnant who aren't women. And I remember, and I'm going to be really honest, being okay, but most people, because I'm privileged, and I never had to think about these things before. And literally 2 days after, I went to another workshop where I was literally sitting next to a non-binary parent who gave birth. And literally we were sitting butt to butt on the couch, right? And they told everybody there on the panel how hard and difficult and depressing it was when they were pregnant, because everybody misgendered them all the time. Mm-hmm. And they, and it's so weird, like maternity clothes, they're all women's clothes. Yeah. Every shirt made for a pregnant belly has fucking pink flowers on it. Why? Why? And they were I don't want to wear this shit. My belly's big, but I don't give a fuck about your flowers. I want a black shirt. Can I? No? Wow. And it was so... It was really enlightening to me, because literally 2 days before, I was being a cis privileged person, being okay, but most people will. Yeah. But then you're sitting next to someone who literally is looking at you in the face and telling you, this was one of the darkest moments of my whole entire existence. Yeah. Because cis people are not willing to make a change. And I don't know, if you have a heart or a moral compass, that shit will take you 2 seconds. Yeah. Right? And I felt so small on that couch, sitting next to that person. Yeah. Because 2 days ago, I was is it really that bad? Yeah. It is.
Mais ouais, non, c'est exactement ce qui s'est passé avec l'ascenseur, parce que la façon que j'ai réalisé qu'il n'y avait pas d'ascenseur dans le métro, c'est une dame qui est venue faire une conférence par rapport au capacisme à l'école pour un cours, puis elle expliquait qu'elle voulait emmener elle est en chaise roulante, puis elle voulait emmener ses filles au métro, puis c'était la première fois qu'elle prenait le métro pour aller à l'école, mais elle pouvait pas. Fait qu'elle a dû attendre comme devant, puis espérer qu'ils prennent la bonne direction, puis parce qu'elle pouvait pas aller plus loin, parce qu'elle avait pas d'ascenseur. C'est tellement frustrant, parce que je pouvais pas m'assurer que mes enfants étaient corrects, puis c'est comme une petite fille de 12 ans avec comme une plus jeune. Fait que là, j'étais comme... Il n'y a pas d'ascenseur dans le métro. Il n'y a pas d'ascenseur. Fait que c'est vraiment en mettant une face, et tu sais, la façon dont... Comme Titi a dit, tout est tellement plus accessible maintenant. C'est facile de suivre plus de personnes disabled. C'est facile de suivre plus de personnes de transgenres. Puis juste en étant en contact avec ces personnes-là, il y a des affaires que tu vas juste... You caught on shit. So, ouais.
Do better.
Yeah, do better. Again.
Do better.
Still, honestly. Always.
Yeah. And it's honestly, like you said, it's not as hard as you would think. It's easier to get access to information and get educated. It's easier than ever, I would say. So
yeah. I think people are very stuck to, they want to believe that they're good people, and they believe that being an oppressor automatically makes you like a villain.
Yeah.
But it's like, we live in a system of hierarchies and systems of oppression, and we all benefit from, most of us benefit at least from something. And we have to sit with that. And it doesn't, I don't think that has much to do with morality, but if you acknowledge it and don't do anything about it, then, then it can be questionable.
Yeah. Il faut juste poser les bonnes questions. Like, am I a good person? Who does that help?
Yeah.
Cette question être personne. Est-ce que je suis une bonne personne? Qui ça aide? Mais c'est comme, qui est-ce que je peux aider? Ça, this is more helpful. Comme, qui je peux aider? Puis là, on commence à poser. Parce que, am I a good person? Who cares?
Yeah.
tu pourrais s'attendre si tu m'as aidé à comme, descendre les escaliers. You know, like, it doesn't matter. Puis j'ai lu une phrase de une personne disabled qui disait que comme my body is disabled and able at the same time, parce que yes, disabled in the sense que comme je peux pas avoir access à everything, but able because I'm living. Oui. And it helps me live, like, so it is valid.
Yeah, and like I said, oui, c'est sûr qu'il y a des trucs que je peux pas faire à cause de mon handicap. That sucks sometimes. Mais littéralement, 95% de mes problèmes pourraient être réglés si la société comme was fixing itself.
Right.
If we made a change. Oui, je pourrais pas faire du jogging autour du parc La Fontaine, but like I said earlier, I don't care. I don't want to do that. I want to go to school. I want to take public transit and go places. Puis à la fin de la journée, ça, comme society has to fix itself for me to have access to these things. My body doesn't need to change because we've been known that elevators are a thing. These things already exist. We just have to put them where they are needed, aka everywhere.
Yeah. I think that sums up the discussion. Honestly, Allie, it's so happy to see you again. Thank you so much for being here. This was a very enlightening conversation, and I really hope, I know people got something out of this because ableism is so not talked about a lot, like especially within the Black community. And I just hope people are more mindful of how they participate in systems that don't directly affect them.
Same, je suis vraiment contente de te revoir. Je suis vraiment contente que ce soit notre première conversation de Black History Month.
I'm so blessed.
Yeah.
The animals are blessing me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And so on that note, I'm Titi.
And I'm Beck.
And we're what the kids call woke or whatever.